We're live. Hello, this is Larry Montgomery, Sr., the host of Crossing Bridges, the talk show for African American men and youth. This is my son, William. William, introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm William Montgomery, and happy to be here.
You got your TV voice on now, huh?
That's reasonable.
I hear you. You go with it. This week we're going to talk about generational pathologies. Now, we started thinking about that last week, although it's on my list of topics. I have 15 of them. It is on my list of topics. And I wanted to kind of highlight some of the things, the traps, problems that we tend to fall into from one generation to the next. And the greatest or the most frequent example is young women getting pregnant and young men impregnating women, young girls. And so you start your house a lot. Ooh, wait a minute. Hold on. I'm seeing something here.
Hello.
My goodness. Thank God. Who do we have blessing us today? It is, introduce yourself.
April Montgomery.
There she is. My
Hello,
God.
sis.
Hey, Will.
And so welcome to the show. And I'm glad you're here. Although we can't see you, which is,
I was told that was an option, so.
Say what?
I was told that was an option.
Yeah. We didn't expect you to use it. Okay, we're talking about generational pathologies. And like I was just saying, I don't know if you heard, the one that we usually focus on is young men and young women having children before they become adults, before they find the opportunity or move out of the household with the family and have their own household, start their own lives, and how that affects their future. And we can talk about that for hours. But what I wanted to do, as I was, me and Will were talking before we started, was about, well, let me ask you, did you have a comment you'd like to make before we get started on generational pathologies?
No, I'll see how the conversation goes.
Okay. So I did some research because I didn't want to just come out here and talk off the cuff, because it is an issue that fathers, excuse me, hold on a second, devil getting busy. Okay. It is an issue in the Black community because we find ourselves, it's like running in mud. You're trying to get your family started. You just created a family, and then suddenly there's a little family, right in the midst of it, and they've got to grow up and also be parents and be responsible all at the same time. They don't really get an opportunity to learn. Is that your radio or something back? Or is that an echo?
It sounds like an echo.
April, you got on two different items?
No, just one.
Okay. All right, let's go on now. So let me get to what the research was that I found. And I'm very excited about it because it's very interesting. Generational pathologies. And this first article kind of gives us a background, but the second article, which you'll see, and I'll talk about in a minute, really starts to talk about the meat of the subject. If you're experiencing more than the normal amount of bad luck, then you could be a victim of a generational curse. Now, again, we're talking about pathologies, but bear with me. Generational curses or family curses have more than one origin definition. It could be coming from genetic imperfections, that are passed down from your parents, or spiritual curses placed upon your ancestors for sins they committed in the past. Okay. So to examine this topic and definitely we want to examine this topic and have an open mind about the implications of this. According to Christianity, generational curses are real and common. Followers wholeheartedly believe that the sins of fathers will fall upon the heads of their children. Now, basically where we're going with that is you learn from your parents. And that's true because they are your entire world when you're little, when you're a child. So the things that go on in the household, you may or may not be paying attention to, but you become familiar with them. For example, if your parents smoke, or if one parent smokes and they smoke in the household, the children may not smoke at that particular time when they're young, but as they grow up, they may find their way to that habit and begin to become smokers. Okay. Same thing, and William was talking about this earlier, about abusive relationships. One parent, because they came from a household where they saw this on the regular and they just had to deal with it, whether they wanted to pay attention to it or not, may have a tendency to do that in their relationship. And then in that relationship, when they have children, the children see the same thing over again. So now we have, from one generation to another generation, a particular pathology that they didn't realize that it was that when they came out of that situation, when they became adults, my grandchildren, for example, would feel comfortable in a household, or if that was going on in their household. They may or may not do it, but then the question is as well, if you're comfortable with something and it shows itself, how are you going to respond? You may just gloss over it, may ignore it or whatever, and then it starts to develop right up under your eyes. And it's like, oh, well, this is how we roll. I came from that, and here it is again. So let me go on. I'm actually reading some of this. So if it looks like I'm just talking, then it does. The way religion sees it, no matter how devout, moral, and kind we are, the level of our great grandfathers' indiscretion, and that's grandfathers, grandmothers too, is included. Indiscretion will govern our fortune or misfortune. Who wants to spend their lifetime doing good deeds only to be cursed in the end? And I think what they're saying here is that while you may be doing the right thing in your household, you still have in the back of your mind the thing, yelling and cursing and carrying on, mistreating other people, being selfish, not realizing that is something that you can decide to control, that you can decide to manage better than what it was when you were coming up. Okay, am I clear? There, there's still that noise coming up.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's go. Let's see. Well, deep inside the Christian doctrine lies some atonement for this. Complicated as it may be, an atonement that can possibly free one of the curses or this dysfunction if done right, in the correct mindset and with a humble heart. We need to understand that, yeah, we have issues that we bring to the table in this new relationship as far as creating our own family. So let's go on. let's first look at a few ways to recognize if you've been affected by a generational curse. And I'm just going to kind of run through some of this here. Psychological indicators. Generational curses are believed to affect the mind first because it is within that battleground that all other parts of the body are controlled. As most of us know, the mind-body connection is strong. And so starting with the mind is a genius way for a curse to take over quickly. Since these curses are generational, they are said to affect individuals as early as childhood. Now, that does not mean that they manifest these curses at childhood. It could be later on in life that these things, a child can't go out and buy liquor, all right? So if the curse is that your father or grandfather was an alcoholic, it's in the back of your mind, who you are in your DNA, if you will, and that when you become of age that you can buy your own alcohol or drink alcohol openly, then you have that inclination. Okay, so let me go on. Mental illness. One sign believed to be a generational curse is mental illness, manifesting as depression or multiple personality disorder, and etc. Now, mental illness is seen in so many different ways. From science, it's seen as a malfunction in the brain. It is seen as an awakening, and for religion, it is seen as a demonic possession. Now, we all understand that, right? From a physical standpoint, the mind, there may be a chemical imbalance that causes some sort of mental illness, okay? The brain just isn't working, or all cylinders aren't popping as they should. But then again, from a religious standpoint, there is clearly about demonic possessions, that there are just these spirits that are upon you. You didn't ask for it. You're not looking for it. They just manifest themselves in your life they could have been brought on by something that your parents did or something that someone else has done. You've all heard of what they call them, voodoo, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a kind of a religious type thing. People believe in it. They use a lot of herbs, roots, and things like that there, and a whole lot going on with that. But then, yeah, if there are people out there who can do that, then there must be some mechanism out there that can counteract that. I don't really find too many people who do these things as far as voodoo or whatever like that there, who don't have a good and a bad side. Not a good and bad side, but I can do this and then I could correct it. If you have a demon on you, I could get it off you, type thing. Like the gypsies used to do with all kinds of things that they do. But I want to get into a conversation about them. Mm-hmm. Let me go on. Okay. Here's an example that I give. For instance, if your father was a heavy drinker, abusive, and abandoned his family, and you find that you are following the exact same route, then maybe you could be under a curse. And so sometimes it helps, first off, if you yourself realize that, my father or my mother was promiscuous. And when you start a relationship with someone, you start doing the same thing. We're just boyfriend and girlfriend. We're not, but I thought we were trying to really get to know each other, that we might have a life together. And you can't seem to control yourself at the start. What's going to happen down the road? You know, you have to ask yourself that question before you go too far, because some people, they don't have a clue that they're doing something wrong. You know, we talked about the me attitude. It's all about me type of a thing, as opposed to, well, if I want to be in a relationship, it's a give and take type of a thing. We had that conversation a couple of weeks ago, right, Will?
Yes.
Okay. So let me get back over here. Now, generational curses are also believed to leave marks on the body and influence the health. This can range from minor issues to severe health problems, which cause a major setback in life. Now I'm going to talk about addictions. Although this could fall under character flaws, it can also be labeled as a physical ailment. Addictions can dramatically change the physical body and can derive from strange cravings that have no known origin. If you find yourself overindulging, it could be just physical. It could be just as physical as mental. Pay attention to what you crave and compare it with any habits you know about from your parents. It goes on to talk about disease, illnesses, and injuries. And I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Sickness and injury can surely be classified as a generational curse if you believe so. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, well, of course, they can be generational because they can be genetic. Now, this does not mean that you are cursed. It could simply mean you were unfortunate enough to get this gene. Okay? Now, I want to move on to the article that really brings this whole thing home for me, and I think for everybody in the room. Can you break the cycle of generational dysfunction? Okay. Often, some of our deepest personal problems are rooted in something we cannot control. Dysfunctional family behavioral patterns that came before us. But we can control our choices, and each of us can choose life and good things. I don't know if you if you heard this, but there was a song out in the 70s that did very, very well. It was entitled "The Cat's in the Cradle." Have either one of you heard that song?
I can't say that I have.
No.
Okay, let me just pull up. I'm sure if I tell you a couple of lines, you'll say, yeah, I've heard that. In 1974, American singer and songwriter Harry Chapin recorded a song entitled "Cats in the Cradle." The song is about a father who was too busy to spend time with his son. Instead offering vague promises to spend time with him in the future. In time, the boy grows up to become a man very much like his father, focused on career and other personal pursuits at the expense of family relations. As the father grows old and finally has time to look back on his life, he deeply desires to get to know his adult son and have a meaningful relationship with him. Sadly, the father comes to realize that his son is absorbed with the same materialistic priorities he had, and so a close relationship will never happen. The last verse concludes with this sad line. And as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. Does that bring it back to your memory?
Never
No.
heard this.
It wasn't like I was going to sing it or something.
It makes sense though.
I've heard it a number of times, and I like it. You know, the father is calling the son, and no, first it starts out with the son wanting to spend time with his father, play ball or something, whatever. The father says, yes, we'll do it this weekend, whatever. And then he never gets to it because he's out working, busy, whatever. And then as the father gets older, he has more time on his hands. So now he's reaching out to have a relationship with the son. And the son is now in the midst of developing his family or growing his family. And so he doesn't have time for the father. And then the father realizes, well, my son grew up just to be just like me. You know, on the one hand, good, he's a hard worker, a family-oriented guy. On the other hand, he doesn't have a relationship with his father. His father doesn't have a relationship with him because they never stop to make the time to have that relationship. And so when I read that, you know, it touched my heart because I can't say that my father worked all of the time, but he was gone most of the time. And so there wasn't that kind of a relationship as you grow up. And if any individual comes before you and starts to talk to you, whether they're older than you or younger than you can handle yourself. You can understand, well, this is going to be a relationship. How far is it going to go? Type of a thing. And in that relationship, the types of things that you can talk about or do together. For example, the pastor of your church. The pastor, yes, is the pastor, but they're still a human being. And so when they take time out to relax or whatever, your conversation with them would be different than it would be when they're standing in the pulpit talking to the church. You see what I'm saying? That's a relationship, and you understand how that goes. Just like with a fellow student. At the beginning of the semester, you don't know them, they don't know you. But as time goes on, during the semester, you start to interact or whatever. And by the end of the semester, you're having conversations with them, whether you like them or not. You fashion your relationship based on these interactions over the course of the semester. And so with father and son, simply this, when, and daughters too. So I'm not just limiting this, okay?
Yeah.
When they're young and they're babies, you talk to them like babies. You know, you have baby conversations. When they become teenagers, you have teenage conversations. And then when they become adults, now you can have adult conversations. And at that point, you have the opportunity to have personal conversations with them. You know, I can't be your father and talk to you like you're my friend. You know, you are my friend, but I'm your father. I'm still responsible for you. And, you know, so there's a line. You know, some people don't have a problem crossing it. I have a problem crossing it. Because at the end of the day, I'm still looking for you to respect me, and I should still respect you. You know, I don't need parents. My parents are dead. So I've had my parents. Okay. So you learn that relationship. And this song was talking about at that point in life, when the father could have an adult and a personal conversation with his son, he had already pretty much, how do you say it, created or helped that son and enabled that son to understand that, well, listen, I've got work to do. I don't have time to stand around and chat, you know, and this is my focus, that I got to get my work done, as opposed to saying, well, yeah, let's sit down, let's play cards, let's watch TV together, you know, let's go for a walk together, whatever, these things. Because when you're in a relaxed situation, you can be open and honest with people, you know, depending on the relationship, you know. So I think I've said enough there. Were there any questions at this point? Or comments? No? Okay,
Well,
so I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll just say that with regard to like the alcoholic parent or the parent that drinks heavily, it's you have access to alcohol at a younger age too. So it's not just when you can, the problem doesn't start once you get out of the house. It can start in the house because you have access
Mhm,
to liquor
mhm.
that that person, because if they drink a lot, they might not notice that it's missing. So it can start actually much younger than the other parent or parent realizes because it's starting at home.
Mhm. True, true. Access is key. Um, you know, some parents fool themselves if they're alcoholics or whatever, or just heavy drinkers, however you want to call it. I only drink when I go out to dinner. Well, I may have a drink at lunchtime. I have a drink at the football game. I have a drink when I'm at the laundromat. I have a drink when I'm sitting in front of the TV. I have a drink before breakfast. You know,
Mhm.
and it starts to manifest. And as your point, April, is that reaching for that bottle, that means it's convenient to wherever you are. And so if the child is seeing this, there's nothing to stop them from when dad is not sitting in the chair reaching for his bottle. Why don't I sit there because he's at work and let me do what dad does, you know,
Mm.
reach for
Right.
the bottle. And, you can hide that, once you understand that, well, this is not something that they want me, that it's okay for me to do. Kids learn how to hide things quickly. Okay. So let me get on to the point that I think I'm just my cursor here. Okay. So we talked about the song. Family traits are often passed down from parents to children, and this cycle has been repeated for thousands of years. Some of these traits may be positive and beneficial, like nurturing skills, valuing hard work or education. However, negative and destructive behavior is also passed down within families. When God calls us and opens our minds to follow his way of life, we may not be fully aware of how our new relationship with him will not only change us individually, but can also have a wonderful influence on our descendants, impacting future generations. Many people selfishly live only for today. They don't understand or appreciate how one member of a family can impact other members. The author goes on to point out about the Ten Commandments. Um, God left instructions. The scriptures often remind us that it's important to think generationally. Consider God's instructions in the Ten Commandments that, quote, I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. Now, this is found in Exodus 25-6. It's easy to believe from this scripture that God simply punishes those, who disrespect him and blesses those who love him. But God is not a vengeful and angry father who intentionally punishes great grandchildren for the sins committed generations earlier by others. A better way to understand this scripture is to realize that family dysfunctions and their consequences are passed down from parents to children and from generation to generation. Curses are the result of breaking God's law, and many sins are perpetrated in the next generation by the poor example of the previous generation. He goes on to talk about repeating patterns of mistakes. each human family has its own culture, including unique strengths and weaknesses. Some of these may be the result of genetic inheritance. For example, some families have a history of significant musical or athletic accomplishments passed down from parents to children to grandchildren and even great grandchildren. Even though it takes great skill development to be an excellent musician or athlete, a certain natural endowment is inherited from birth. Modern science has also discovered that our genetics may even predispose us to certain diseases. Other strengths and weaknesses within an individual family culture are the result of its environment or choices. This includes values, priorities, and decision-making skills. When negative choices and a bad home environment become deeply entrenched within a family culture, individual members can become self-destructive and unknowingly pass these traits on. Was that too much?
It's a lot, but not too much.
I'm not even get to the meat yet. I mean, this is just the potatoes and the gravy. Yeah. Okay. Let me get to that because I don't want to go out. You know, I mean, that wouldn't look good on stage. You know. Let me just say this: God's greatest example of that, so we can understand when He says your sins may be passed down to and may be taken out on generations to follow you, was Abraham. Okay, now Abraham was an obedient friend of God. This is in James 2:23. He rejected the pagan sinful culture of his family line and chose to live a new and positive way of life. At God's request, Abraham left that environment and even his own family to follow the course God set for him. In doing so, he would become known as the father of the faithful. This man left his home, left his family, what he was comfortable with, to go to a place where he'd never been before because God led him there. Because of Abraham's willingness to abandon the sinful habits and practices of his generations, God made specific promises to him about the future of his descendants. Your descendants will be as the dust of the earth. It'll be that many. Some of Abraham's descendants form the core of what we now know as major English-speaking nations and many other nations. Okay? God goes on to say, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in all the families of the earth shall be blessed. No, in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. We got that? You still with me?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, we're getting real close to this. Almost 2,000 years later, this is after Abraham, Jesus Christ, a direct descendant of Abraham, would be born to atone for all sin and offer eternal life to all mankind. The entire world came to be blessed through Abraham because of his willingness to break with the patterns of past generations and embark on a new way of life revealed by God. We got that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's good meat there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we go forward. David, a man after God's own heart, excuse me. I'm looking at it, saying the wrong word. Another example of how powerful and important a personal relationship with God is can be seen in God's expression of love for King David. Paul is recorded as quoting God in a powerful sermon by proclaiming, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will. From this man's seed, according to the promise, God raised up for Israel a Savior, Jesus. You find that in Acts 13:22. Now, Christ was a descendant of King David, and both of them were physical descendants of Abraham. But did David's personal relationship have a positive effect on any of his other direct descendants? And he did. Okay. And I'm not going to tell you about that right now because I want to get to something else. Let me just, no, I'm going to go on. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Let's see. Where is it at here? In 1874, now you all both should be able to get with this. In 1874, a member of the New York State Prison Board noticed that 6 members of the same family were incarcerated at the same time. The board did some research, looking back a few generations to try to find the original couple who initiated this tragic family legacy. They traced the family line back to an ancestor born in 1720, a man considered lazy and godless with a reputation as the town troublemaker. He was also an alcoholic and viewed as having low moral character. To make matters worse, he married a woman who was much like him, and together they had 6 daughters and 2 sons. So here we go. Mm-hmm. Here is what the report revealed about the approximately 1,200 descendants of this couple who were alive in 1874. Mm-hmm. There were 310 of them were homeless. 160 of them were prostitutes. 180 suffered from drug and alcohol abuse. 150 were criminals and spent time in prison, including 7 for murder. The report also found that the state of New York had spent $1.5 million, a shockingly high number at that time, to care for this line of descendants, and not one had made a significant contribution to society. So, sadly, we can see by this example how the harmful dysfunctions of parents can be passed down from generation to generation. Now, a refreshing contrast. In contrast, another family heritage was studied involving a couple who lived about the same time. The second family study began with the famous preacher, Jonathan Edwards, who was born in 1703. A deeply religious man who lived a life of strong moral values and became a minister and a dedicated family man. He married a deeply religious woman named Sarah, who shared his values, and together they had 11 children. Eventually, Jonathan Edwards became the president of Princeton University. Here is what researchers discovered about the approximate 1,400 descendants of Jonathan and Sarah Edwards in 1874. 13 were college presidents. 65 were college professors. 100 were attorneys. 32 were state judges. 85 were authors of classic books. 66 were physicians. 80 held political offices, including state governors. 3 were state senators. 1 became vice president of the United States. What a difference it makes in the kind of example and values that are passed down to the next generation. Strong moral values can indeed bring blessings and opportunities for generations to come. Okay, I've stopped reading. Bill, you with me? Okay.
Say what you
April?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Same. I thought it was fascinating to get an opportunity to understand that, we're not perfect. We never were perfect, and we may never be perfect. I don't think we'll ever be perfect.
Mhm.
We do have the ability to change our situation. And when we look at, it's not just about me, it's about those who are going to come after me, how important it is to try to be a good citizen, to try to be a good parent, and if you will, be a good Christian, okay? Because it does make a difference. When you have children running around the household and all they hear is screaming, fighting, and cussing and carrying on, people that come around them that are liars, that are thieves, that are violent, this is not a good situation for anyone, adult or child. But the fact is that if you're managing your household well, and you, I guess, marry someone who of good character, good morals, that you can work with. I'm not saying dominate and control, because we had that conversation about dominating and controlling people. You have to remain prayerful. You have to remain committed. You want to have a relationship with God, a godly Christian relationship, and all that together, and having a household that is going to nurture and raise up children who are going to be godly children, good citizens, good parents, and so on. Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pass around.
I do kind of, huh?
Go on, I'm listening.
I was going to say, I do kind of deviate a little bit from that because, yeah, you want to do stuff for the future generations, but you really got to focus on yourself and trying to be the best you. Because when you become the best you, all that future stuff is going to fall on the line. So you really have to do self-assessment and find out, hey, am I living the best life that is going to benefit me? Because if I'm not here tomorrow, I'm not going to be here for my descendants, so I need to get myself straight, whether it's eating right, eating healthy, I know I'm a hypocrite right now, reading, I don't read for fun, but I do read, I had a friend that I was talking to a few weeks ago, and I read something on Facebook, and it was really interesting. I read the whole thing through, and I sent it to him, and he was like, man, I'm not going to read this. I said, look, I don't like to read either, but when it pertains to my livelihood or my life, what I'm saying, I read for stuff that's going to save my life. I used to read Hardy Boys and stuff like that. I don't read books like that for entertainment. I'm trying to find out what information is out there for me to make my life better. So that's why I read, so I can't say that, oh, I'll just pick up a book from the library and read it just for fun. I'm not that type of person, but we do need to be able to read and understand what's in front of us. You know what I'm saying? All these papers that they have us sign, they don't just affect us, they affect our families, they affect our children, they affect our descendants, because when we leave here, what we agreed to, our family's not responsible for it. So we really have to start paying attention to our day-to-day activities, because like I said, our children are watching us. They're learning how to live in this world through watching us. They're not going to ask us how to do things. They're going to look, they're going to learn. Now, if they have any questions, they might ask. But for the most part, if they think that they're getting all the information that they have gotten or they need, they're not going to ask. They're just going, oh, well, this is how dad does it, or this is how mom does it, and I'm going to do it like that, and everything's going to be great because that's mom and that's dad, you know what I'm saying? That's, how they do it is the right way. And so that's why I say that we got to look inside and figure out what's going to put ourselves in the best position to represent ourselves for our future generations, because that's the way that we're going to benefit them to be able to get to where they need it. Because we plant that seed in them, You know, we might only get so far, but they might be able to take that and run the whole marathon. You know,
Mhm.
I digress.
Okay, no, that's good. April.
Well, I think it's important to, I agree with Will that we have to be our best selves. And in that, realizing what negative and what positive we have from our previous generation. So if you have balancing, so okay, you're really good at working hard, but what sacrifices are you making, and how does that affect, your family? So it's a good trait, but taking into consideration how it's affecting the right now, and then how it affects the your children and future generations, but also it helps you to identify the negative as well so that you don't pass that on. So, you have people who are in households where people smoke, right? Like you were saying before, that smoke. And some kids will not. Like they will see it at home and they won't pick it up. They will be very adverse to it. So the same thing with alcohol. So you'll have some who will pick it up and others who will be completely adverse to it because of what they've seen. But if you're going forward, now it could have skipped that kid, it could have skipped that kid, but now the grandchild, you have to keep an eye out for that. Like, okay, wait, I'm adverse to it, but is it still in the generational line? So now I have to keep an eye out. I have to let my children know, listen, this is a possibility. Um, these are things you should stay away from. These are things that you should do. Um, Preparing for college. If your parent went to college or your parents went to college, they can help you. If they didn't, they may be able to give you resources. But when we're talking about breaking um, the curses or correcting the dysfunction, it's taking what Will said and doing a self-assessment and figuring out what are things, excuse me, what are things that I do that are negative aspects of what I've learned, um, and how can I prevent my future generations from carrying that burden and only taking on the positive things that have come down the line.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Okay. I mean, we learn, we should learn every day.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're learning, we need to focus on those things that we do, that we've already learned, and determine whether we learned well, we didn't learn well, and try to correct them. And that's all we really can do. There is no, you're not going to wake up one morning and be perfect and then say, okay, now it's time for me to start living my life. You already have baggage. Okay. Some of it you picked up on your own, some of it someone else put on you that you didn't even ask for.
Mm.
Some good, some bad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, there is a moment where me is important. But while we're looking at me, we need to understand and keep in mind that the me is only the center of us. There's a us. And we all need to work together and understand how we can live together. No one wants to make mistakes in their life. And sometimes the only opportunity you have to avoid mistakes is by learning from people who already been there and done that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If they were successful, great. Then they can tell you, well, don't do that, do this, because it worked. You still have the option of deciding, well, just because that worked for you doesn't mean it's going to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can I throw something else in there?
Sure.
Because a huge part that was just jumped on me while you were talking was a lot of people don't do well with people critiquing them.
Mm.
We got to get past that, because just like you said, if you tell me that I'm doing something wrong, I can't take that as a personal attack. I have to say, okay, well, why is this person telling me this? And then I have to do my self-assessment and say, okay, is this a valid statement? Is this what they pointed out to me? Is this hindering me from getting to where I need to be so I can be the best me? And then if it does apply, let me fix it. If it doesn't apply, okay, well, what you said, I heard it, I understood it, I did a self-assessment, and it doesn't apply. So now I dismiss it. But don't just take it as a personal attack and somebody's trying to tear you down. I mean, we do that a lot. I mean, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't like my shirt? Or you just don't know fashion. Okay, well, if they don't like your shirt, they don't like your shirt. I mean, it doesn't matter. But if they're trying to recommend that you wear a dress shirt to your, to your job interview, that might be something that will help you get to where you're trying to be, So, like I said, we just need to be able to accept criticism and grow from it.
Well, yeah, that's true. But there's no guarantee that whoever is going to take the time out to try to help you is going to come across in an acceptable manner.
True.
I mean, personally, I like your shirt. Now that you mentioned it, but anyway, but you made a good point. Sometimes we have to understand that it's not always about me, even though they're talking about me. It may be something about, well, you said this. Well, did you mean that way, or did you mean it this way? Well, don't jump on me because I said something. Get to the point of what you're talking about here before I go, nuts. We got to get over that kind of stuff, that kind of response, even though it may be what's in your head, not necessarily what you want to come out. Again, people are always watching you. I mean, you're a great guy, but sometimes, a shirt, I have a problem with that. But anyway,
for you next time.
Wear the tie.
I don't know about the tie now.
April, did you want to say anything else? Because we're going to be cutting off in about 2 minutes.
No, it's just I think what was said has been said, that really figuring out what is hindering you and tracking back to where that came from. Like, is it something learned? Is it something that you knew, or is it something ingrained that takes a higher level of prayer and fasting and speaking with God to get past? Or is this just a learned behavior that you have to work on unlearning, or learning a new way to handle stuff? Like anger management, you can take classes for that, or are you trying to stop smoking? There are resources that you have access to. It's just figuring out what the hindrance is and where it came from and how to move forward so you don't negatively affect your now or your future.
Amen.
Okay. All right. I want to thank my guests for participating. Our special guest today, April.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thanks.
And we got Will, faithful, Abraham, which is good. Hopefully we can have another conversation. Well, we'll be here next week, God willing. And if you have the time, April, please feel free to join us. I'll keep you on the email list, so at least you'll know. And probably tomorrow night, the show will be edited and up on YouTube. I'll send you the link if you want to look at it. So let me thank our guests, because we do have a number of people who do follow us. We're going to start advertising a little more on Facebook to see if we can, build it up and pour it out. But it is what it is. Next week's conversation on the focus in. We talked about racism last week, and we're going to talk about racism again next week. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a test. So for those out there who are interested in finding out or determining whether they are or are not racist, join us to take the test. We will score it right here live, and we will post your grades. Name, faces will be revealed. Anyway, thank you, and thank God for you, and thank all of you who have joined us and who may join us again. God bless and amen.
God bless.
God bless.